Good morning, Plainview.
Good morning.
Well, you know, the computer actually admits that I exist. I am trying to force an ancient machine to function. I'm not ignoring you. Okay, Plainview, I'm gonna have to reboot this thing, so it's gonna take a second. I'm gonna disappear and then I'll reappear. Or conversely, I may take a hammer and finish this thing off, whatever. Yeah, I've got Plainview back. Usually the first day or so of the class, this particular class, we have to fight with all sorts of malfunctions that should have been fixed, like during the summer or something. But we end up fixing them in the class instead. This thing worked like a charm about an hour ago. Yeah, shut up. That's telling me the system is ready. Seeing is believing. What a shock. No, I can't get the document camera. Could get it before. There it is. You guys all know the answer to that question? Okay, they're going to start talking about it in the book. Somebody out in Plainview, tell me what you can see on the screen right now. We have 2 students out in Plainview watching.
Push your button.
They're getting instruction on how to make their mics work. You've got mics in front of you, but
What is globalism?
what is globalism? Okay, good. At least we know that's working. I'm sorry, but for some reason you can't see my lovely face. I don't know why. That camera is not turning on.
Mr. Hunt, we can see you now.
Oh, you can?
Yes, sir.
That's all I care about. Ta-da. Okay, let's do YMCA. Well, no, never mind. I'm too old for that. That happens to be a question. What is globalism that we'll answer today? Just in passing. But all this is an introductory class. Basically, I'll be your guide. I hate using the word instructor. I'll be your guide for the next 15 weeks or so. It's actually a 16-week class, but the 16th week is the exam week. We'll look at Europe, the Americas, Africa, really briefly to see what got people coming over here and the effect of all those people coming together. Things that finally have, we'll show what's going on in Europe that makes people go in and explore. We'll show what happens in colonies here up to the point where the English colonies in particular rebel, gain their independence, and then we'll look at about 70 years of our country's early history up to the Civil War and conclude the Civil War, and we'll look at, for a few days, our efforts at kind of rebuilding the country after all the destruction of the Civil War. That'll be the end of it. For this week, are you all, I'm talking mainly to people in this room, but also out there in Plainview, is everyone conversant with Blackboard?
Yeah.
And you know how to get into this class? Okay. I thought I sent, but I may not have sent, you said you saw an email?
Yeah, I saw an email.
Okay. So an email has gone out, in theory, to all of you. Is there anybody in here that's not on that, on the roster that I put up here? Did you all sign in? Yeah. Okay. So everyone should have a copy of that somewhere buried in their South Plains College email. Dig it out. And what we're going to do, what that has in it, I just introduced the course a little bit, and I kind of repeat that now. What you need to do to make life easy on yourselves is bookmark a couple of URLs. Everybody in here knows what a URL is, right? Oh, it's lovely. You can't believe what you're dealing with people that are, you know, like my age and then they don't know what a URL is. You guys are all ahead of the game. What happens, you log on, I'll give you a URL for Blackboard so you can bypass a lot of the other junk. You can get into Blackboard by going through the MySPC, not MySPC, but just the SPC website. But if you bookmark the URL once you get to Blackboard, then when you push the button, all you have to do is log on to Blackboard. You don't have to mess with MySPC and all that. When you get to that, let's see if I can get the PC cam thing to come up. By the way, I noticed you're all sitting there, some with writing implements and what have you. Feel free to bring, in fact, I encourage you to bring your computers. How many people don't have a computer that they could bring to class? Okay, I'll figure something out for you. When we do the exams and stuff like that, and we're only going to have 3 exams, but we'll do it on computers, and it's nicer to do it in our own classroom and not have to be crammed into an exam room, something like that. So we'll do that. Also, you'll notice I don't even have that baby turned on. I'll turn it on so you can see what it looks like. It's blurry. The screen's not that clear. And you can follow what we're doing. I'll tell you what notes I'm working on or whatever. You can follow that on your own computer, and it's crystal clear. Much better. Okay. So if you get into Blackboard, you go to your class, and our class happens to be 1301, 275, and 511 for the people out in Plainview. Come on, warm up. Dark enough. Why am I getting music? That's somebody else. You can see it on there more or less. This is how our class is made up. Now I got to tell you a secret. Don't go talking to anybody in the administration because they said don't have buttons. And they have this new format, everybody be the same, and it's blah. It's a bunch of words on a page, boring, ugly. So I'm still using the thing with the buttons. And I will continue to use it until they get around to firing me. If you look on that course menu with all the colorful buttons in there, the first thing that matters to us is syllabus. And in this class, for some reason, I didn't erase the double copy, so let's delete that baby. It's kind of like being God, you know, you can just push a button and things disappear. That's the syllabus. I will print on there, and I thought I already did, the syllabus boiled down onto half a page, the things you really need to know. The actual syllabus is long, bulky, filled with a lot of hoo-ha, that you really don't need that either. That you don't really care about until you get to something that really matters. Let's get to something that really matters. There you go. That's my contact information. I think on that, have you looked in that Did you turn on that message? Take a look in the message that I sent out. Can you do that without destroying what you're doing right now?
Some of this message?
What?
Which message is it?
It's just a message from history. May say introduction or something like that. I'll go back in my cave and fix it for you, but basically all I did was give you contact information and the URLs and things like that. And I'll go back and make sure that you have them for the next class. We're going to be using an online textbook, so you don't need to buy that book. But we will be analyzing, doing what we call a book analysis. Everybody will choose a book title. Some of them I actually have copies of. Some you can get online. Some of them you can get from the school library. But for the time being, what I need you to do is pick a title. And only one person to a title. I have a list of about 50 or 60 books, so that shouldn't be too hard. It's got a lot of different subject matter and different people and things like that. I've even got, I think, a couple books on witchcraft and the Salem witch trials, and Aaron Burr, who was kind of a crazy guy. How many people have seen Hamilton? Nobody? Okay, a few people. Well, so you at least know who Aaron Burr was. A lot of other people don't. Some people do. You probably got it in your little golden book of history from your football coach when you're in high school. Lots of different topics. Slavery. I've got several books on slavery. All sorts of things like that. You pick a book. All I want from you this week is, before the end of the day on Friday, send me a message, and I'll show you how to send it. Let's get out of that silliness thing. I hate those silliness. Okay. By the way, there's a book list in here, but you see this button down here that says Message Center? It's the next to the bottom one. If you click on it, yes, machine, you get an email system, and it's private. And that's the one that I'll answer. If you send me a message on that thing, you're going to get an answer pretty fast. As soon as I'm not in a classroom, I'll be reading that and answering. In this system, go in there, click on Create Message, then you'll see recipients, and there's a 2 line there. If you click on that, you can send a message to anybody in this specific class or to me. Find my name buried in there somewhere. Where am I? I know I exist. There I am. At least I did when I looked in the mirror this morning. Put that over in the recipients column. Slap a subject on there and say, Mr. Hunt, what's the meaning of life, or whatever, and send it. By sometime Friday, send me, Mr. Hunt, here's the book I want to read. And I will come back and say, okay, here's 5 questions that kind of guide your reading. Or I'll say, oh, sorry, somebody already grabbed that book. First come, first serve on titles. So the faster you tell me a book title, the better chance you have of getting the one you want. I'm going to give you some readings to do, but we've got to see where everything is first. And it may look like I'm throwing a lot of quantity of things to do, but most of them are a 5-minute exercise to get us broken in and get us started. And after that, it'll be really, really routine. Probably the most important little button on this thing is Notes and Readings. And here's how I've arranged it. I've kind of arbitrarily divided the semester up into units. Some of them are a week long, some of them are half a week long, some are 2 weeks long, who cares? They're a unit. And in that unit I have 3 elements. First of all, I'll say the assignments that you need to do for this unit. And these ones, that looks like a lot of assignments, right? But basically it's watch a video, choose a book, and do the Unit 1 readings. And then sometime before Friday, do quiz 1. I don't even know if quiz 1's available to do yet. We'll go down and look at that. That's the one thing I'll have, assignments to do, just so that you can keep it straight in your mind and you know where you are. The other thing I'll have, Unit 1 readings, those are things I do want you to read. They're just little blurbs. In this case, I say on there, I suggest, you know, it says second quiz, but it's really your first quiz will be based on these readings. Just think about this. You can do your quiz whenever you want, wherever you want. You can have all the notes you want in your lap in front of you or whatever. The point I'm making here is get 100 on all your quizzes, because the average of your quiz grades is 15% of your overall grade. What a good way to start now with an A and 15%. So you can take the quizzes at home. Now when we do exams, that's proctored. We'll do that here. We'll do it in the classroom. That's a different thing. And we'll talk about exams as we get close to the first one. Tell you what they're like. What else do you have? Next thing down is exams and quizzes, and it's totally empty. Guess you can't do an exam or quiz yet. Then I have a little thing, analytical essay. That's what I was just talking about, where you look at a book and you analyze it. It's not a book report. I don't care what the guy says. I've read it. I know what he said. What I want you to do is, did he use good sources? Is he biased? What's the scope of what he's talking about? I mean, is he talking about a particular time in history? Is he talking about a particular place? And then, as you get further down, what's his thesis? What's he trying to sell me? What's his idea? Sometimes that's really crystal clear, and sometimes, go figure. I don't know what he's trying to tell me. Okay? Those are the things you look at in your analysis. And in this thing, we clicked on the analytical essay button. In this thing, there's instructions for the essay, how to go about doing it. And as we go through the semester, if you try doing question 1, you want to send it to me to look at, I can tell you, hey, that's perfect. That's what you need, that's the way you need to do all the questions, or no, here's what you need to do to fix it. Why? Because I want everyone to get an A on the essay too. 15% for the quiz average, 15% for the essay. We're up to 30%. We're all getting A's on all those things. Okay? All you have to do now is pass an exam or two. And you're in like Flint. Everybody gets an A. I don't grade on a curve. If I see a really bad question on a test, or if I see something that's misleading, or if I see something that I didn't teach right, I'll give you credit for that. You know, I mean, I don't penalize you for my mistakes, but I don't curve. So if everybody gets an A, happy days. If everybody flunks, well, I don't give you the grade, it's whatever you earn. Okay? So, also you'll have in there instructions how to submit the thing. I need to update this, and I will in the next day or so. So that's the analytical essay part. And then we were talking about grades. Oh, there's nothing in there, but you hit that little grades button and it'll tell you what you did on your last quiz or whatever. It also gives you the ability to look at the quiz and find out which questions you got wrong and that sort of thing. Finally, there's that message center button. That's how to talk to me. Of course, you guys here sitting in front of me, interrupt me if you don't understand something. I'm being paid to answer your questions, so ask. If you sit there like that, and then later on you say, I didn't understand what he said about this, that's on you. Interrupt me and stop me. And for the people out in Plainview, they can interrupt me too. And if they didn't hear your question, since we don't use the mics in this room very much, if they don't hear your question, I'm going to tell them what the question is so I can answer it and they get the benefit. More questions the better, because we learn stuff that way. Finally, down at the very bottom of the page of this, you can still see it, okay? There's something called Collaborate Ultra. This is a meeting site. I have a class, in fact a class immediately before this one, I teach it on that. For your purposes and mine, we probably won't use it unless, perish the thought, we get kicked out of here for COVID again. If we do, then our class will switch over to Collaborate. And it's kind of neat, it's fun to play with. If you do it at home, it's a little better, actually, than if you do it in the classroom. Why is that? Because there's a technical thing called bandwidth. And if 2 or 3 people turn their computers on and try and show me their video and talk to me through their mic, it'll exhaust the bandwidth and then nobody's will work. So what you do on this, let's go into a session. Have anybody used this before? Okay, good. You go over and join the session. After you click on the session, and you get to see a spinning wheel for a while, especially on this slow computer. And it takes you into a course room. Somebody's already there. Somebody's joined. Who just joined? Fess up. It's good. That was you? Okay. I mean, that's why I'm standing here talking. Yeah, you get in there. Down at the bottom of the page, there's a little crossed out camera. Now if you're in a classroom, you don't want your camera turned on, I can see you. And you don't need your microphone turned on either. And if you do it in the classroom, it isn't going to work if everyone tries to do it at the same time. If you do it at home, you can turn your camera on. In fact, you need to if you're at home, so I can count you as being present for the class. But let's not do that thing at home. I mean, I'm so darn happy to be back in the classroom, you just can't believe it. It's kind of frustrating not to be able to. Okay, over in the corner of this thing, see over there, there's a little kind of purple thing and it's kind of got arrows on it. It's an artsy arrow, I guess. Click on that and there's a little bubble down there, that's your chat. And so I could be talking to you and you don't want to interrupt me, but you got a question that, or you didn't understand something. You can type your question in there. As I'm going along, I can see it. If it's something that makes me want to answer it right away, I will. I'll stop and answer it for everyone's benefit. If it's something that can wait until I'm done talking, I'll do that. But I don't know about you all, but the students out in places like Abernathy and places like that that are doing this all on Collaborate Ultra, for some reason they'd rather use chat function than talk. They're all got this terminal case of the shies. In fact, Wellman Union, each one of those schools, they have a camera, a common camera in the classroom that turns on so I can see the class and see how many of them are asleep. Because then, I guess any of you have ever had to teach anything. But in a way, teaching is kind of like being a stand-up comic or something, right? If a stand-up comic couldn't see his audience, he'd be dead. You got to see the audience. Am I getting through to them? Are they laughing at my jokes or whatever? Well, it's the same thing with a teacher. So in each one of those classrooms, I have a camera so I can see the class. So at Wellman Union, their camera's not working. And I asked Wellman Union, why isn't your camera working? Oh, well, we don't have a USB cable. Yeah, right? It's in somebody's drawer because he doesn't want to plug it in. So usually I go out there. I go out there and bribe those guys. I pay all the high school to visit and I bring them Krispy Kremes. You guys like Krispy Kremes? You're too old and mature to eat Krispy Kremes, aren't you? Huh? No? Okay, well, we'll do something about that. And it ruin your lunch. What do you guys, how many people here are living with mom and dad? There's nothing wrong. Oh, that's great. Man, that lowers the overhead, doesn't it? Is it a pain?
Yeah.
Yeah? No? Yeah. Different people have different attitudes. So the only reason I asked that question was that depends on what your diet's like. So living with mom and dad, you probably actually eat real food. If you're living on yourself, you're probably living on macaroni and cheese What's the going thing now?
I usually just, when I lived on my own, I just kind of just ate out. I never had any time to cook. I didn't have the patience. So
Yeah.
I couldn't-
Macaroni and cheese, breakfast burritos from
Try.
someplace, yeah, whatever, okay. I've got my grandson with him. I'm ancient. In fact, some of the teachers that are helping me with this at the other end of things used to be my students. That's how old I am. I have got grandchildren. I've got at least 2 grandchildren that are older than all of you. Oh, no. Yeah, at least 2 that are older than you. I've got 2 grandchildren that have already graduated from college. One of them's a psychologist. You know, different strokes for different folks. I learned not to tell my kid not to take a certain course because then immediately, you know, they want to do it. I kept my mouth shut. And she's working, she's making money, so. Okay. So much for Ultra, so much for all those buttons. If you have questions, though, about anything, the meaning of life. What's the meaning of life? In one word, no? Yes. I'm not sure what it is. I can't remember the piece of literature because I haven't read it, but apparently the meaning of life is 42. This is according to some book. Might want to look that up. Great wisdom. Something you really need to know. Okay, let's get out of that. Everyone. Okay. How about OpenStax? Anybody see OpenStax yet? Do you know what it is? Let's look at OpenStax. This is our online textbook, and every once in a while, maybe more than every once in a while, go away. Where is it? There. Hey, there's a button for it. There it is. To get to OpenStax, there's a URL in your syllabus. But I will send you, so read your mail. I will send everybody the URL to get into OpenStax, and I'll send you the URL for the shortcut to get into our class in Blackboard. So you don't have to waste time with South Plains College website and all that other stuff. It'll still probably make you log in. OpenStax won't. OpenStax is a free book. And it's not a bad book. I mean, I don't always agree with what they say in it. If you want to start a really good conversation in class, when I say something that OpenStax disagrees with, point it out to me. We can fight over it. Basically, when those professors that wrote those books, you know, and they're starting to throw their weight around and all that, start doing that and disagreeing with what I have to say, I just ask them what they're going to be when they grow up, and they shut up. I actually did that at Texas Tech. Some professor didn't like what I was doing. I was his teaching assistant as a grad student. And I don't know what I was doing that bothered him, but he came in and he started really, you know, giving me what for. And there were a lot of people there, and anybody that manages or anybody that's been in the military, if someone does something wrong, you don't do it in front of the crowd, right? You take them aside. Even on a football team sometimes. Okay, well, this guy lashed into me about doing something. And I just looked at him and said, "What you going to be when you grow up?" And, you know, all of the students start laughing at him. Actually, he was a pretty good guy. And after he recovered, you know, from me saying it, he grabbed his wallet, he pulled out his driver's license, and he threw it on the table, you know. So I took mine out and threw it on the table, and I had him beat by about 15 years. So. Anyway, let's all get along. When you get into OpenStax, I don't know why on these screens it doesn't want to show you everything. I have to play around with it. On your computer, it won't do this. It'll take you, that URL I gave you will take you right to the intro of the book and a table of contents. take a look at it and play with it. Sometime during the week, I'm going to ask you to read the first and second chapters in there. But just play with it. It actually goes all the way up to modern times. We're only going to go through the first 15 or 16 chapters. And I'm not going to tell you, you've probably been in a class when someone's asked this question. Like, Mr. Hunt, do we have to read the book? Back when we didn't have OpenStax and free books, you know. So, no, you don't have to read it. I just asked you to buy that $75 book. No. Because my friend works in the bookstore and we need money. But at the very least, this book will be a reference for us. And a lot of times, if you follow along in the period of time that we're talking about in the book, it'll tell you things that I'm not going to tell you. It'll have little articles in it that'll tell you things that I probably won't have time to tell you about. This is a survey course, so. Okay, that's the textbook. Give it a look. Now for this class, and I'm afraid it's probably happening as we speak, this class is usually recorded. That means somewhere in YouTube, if I'm nice enough to give you the URL, you can find all these classes. Which is not encouragement, don't show up for class, it's because your attendance is required. It's if you weren't feeling well, if it was one of those bad hair days where it was going like that, or whatever, you can go back and look at it. They're usually the kind of material that might make you, help you sleep at night, that sort of thing. Turn that thing on, look at that talking head on the screen telling you all these boring things. I don't usually, I used to do this at Tech, I don't usually do it here, but you can look to your left, right, in front of you and behind you, and you'll probably find someone who, probably all four directions, who doesn't want to be in this class. But they said you had to go to the class because it's a core requirement. So let's try and get through it painlessly. And maybe we can find some stuff in there that, floats your boat, that interests you. For example, that book list I was telling you about. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll print up a copy of it and stick it up on the wall here. Just come in and sign up for the book. But by Friday, I want you to go back into that message center thing and tell me this is the book that I signed up for. Okay? So that's an assignment. I put this question up because I think in the first chapter or the intro of the book, let's see if it'll come up. What are you guys looking at now? Do you see me out there in plain view, or do you see... Okay, I'm trying to get you to see my overhead projector thing. There it is! Wonders never cease. What is globalism? Anybody in here know what globalism is? Got an idea of what it is? Because what we're talking about, we're going to be talking about different countries having their little colonial empires, and all of that involves, in a way, the concept of globalism. The word globalism came into use about 20 years ago. But globalism existed, what globalism describes existed back way beyond the period of time we're starting at. And basically, what globalism... Oh, I've got a definition for it somewhere in here. There you go. I'll read what I... And this isn't the definition. The dictionary doesn't, and I don't get along all the time. And since this is my course, I get to define the words. Globalism seeks to describe and explain nothing more than a world that's characterized by networks connecting the world. And I would add to this description that the networks don't care about geographic barriers, national barriers, or anything. Can you think of something that would fall into that idea? Something that, that just goes everywhere and doesn't stop at borders or anything? Just a common sense question. You all have access to at least one thing that does that. Internet. Yeah. How about, and I guess about 15 years ago, I keep forgetting that you guys probably weren't born about when things happened that I remember like yesterday. How many people in here were alive when 9/11 happened? Can you remember it?
No, I don't think I'm one of those though.
I can remember where I was. I was teaching over at, I was subbing over at Coronado High School. When you started, you know, the TVs just popped up everywhere with the tall buildings being destroyed. I can remember where I was when John F. Kennedy was killed. I can remember where I was when Dwight David Eisenhower was elected President of the United States. Your parents can't even remember that. Maybe your grandparents. Told you I was old. Anyway, globalism, in the sense that we'll talk about, is pretty much colonization and creation of, you know, these big empires that the Spanish did and the British did and the French did. So what we're going to look at, social, economic conditions, technological developments and all that, that motivated people of Europe and made it possible for the people of Europe to cross the Atlantic and come to the Americas. And we'll talk about colonization, kind of in general terms. Might compare the French, Spanish, and the English, maybe the Dutch, if I feel like it that day. And then we'll start focusing on the English colonies mainly. We'll look a little bit at Spanish colonies in terms of places like Santa Fe, because that eventually will, you know, be of interest to us. And we'll follow those English colonies up until the point where they decide it's not convenient to be following orders from somebody on the other side of the Atlantic, rebel against the crown, get their independence, and then after about 10 years figure out how to reorganize, have a constitution. We'll talk about maybe the first 70 years of our young country's history up to the Civil War. We'll do the Civil War. We'll talk about that little period after the Civil War when we're trying to rebuild, because we did a lot of damage, internal damage to ourselves during the Civil War. That's it. That's the whole scope of the class in terms of time and subject matter. Anybody got questions? I'm going to go pick up a set of notes. Hang on. I don't have something I want. We'll start out going back a little bit further than this class really goes. We'll start out talking about the Iberian Peninsula. Where's the Iberian Peninsula? Anybody know? I don't have show and tell up here, so. Anybody? There's two countries on the Iberian Peninsula. Maybe a tiny little piece of another country. Spain and Portugal. If you look at the map, you go over and look at the Mediterranean Sea, Africa and Europe almost touch right there. In between the Iberian Peninsula and the northern coast of Africa. And somewhere around the year 800, somewhere like that. That's way past, you know, before we're studying. That area was dominated by Islamic from different caliphates, but basically we're going to call them the Moors because that's what the people call them then, M-O-O-R. It's really not only one ethnic group, but we lump them all together. And there's going to be an 800-year process of driving them, the Christians driving them off of the peninsula. And the Spanish call it the Reconquista, and I'll get into that later on. Now, we talked about globalism. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about? By this time, by 1300s, by 1200s, maybe before that, the European people were getting acquainted with having goods from the Far East, from what we now call India, from China, from out that way, mainly China. And the way they got those goods, in the two big cities that were doing this, were Genoa, which is on the western coast of the Italian peninsula, and Venice on the eastern coast. They were city-states. In other words, it was a city, but it was also a country. In fact, Venice had an empire. They controlled a lot of islands and things like that out in the Mediterranean, almost all the way to where Turkey is now. That one stage of the game. They were fabulously wealthy. Anybody in here? There's nobody in here that's been in the service. There's nobody old enough in here. Anybody know anybody that's been to Afghanistan? Ask them about the terrain. The roads that went out there to go to China. A lot of them started by going over the Mediterranean. Then you went overland through Central Asia to China that way. I've not been in Afghanistan, but I watched Afghanistan through secret satellites. Maybe I better explain that. How could you watch them through secret satellites? For the first year of my adult life, kind of adult, I wasn't that very much adult, I went to Colorado State University. When I found out I wasn't mature enough to spend more time studying than drinking beer and chasing girls, it was really rough on me. I was underprivileged. There were a lot of rich kids in that school, and they had fancy cars and all that. I had a bicycle, which is a hell of a way to take a girl out on a date. I went and joined the Marine Corps. The Vietnam War was heating up. I didn't want to get drafted because my mommy and daddy were both Marines. I bet you don't know anybody else, but you don't know anybody whose mother and father were both Marines. So I didn't want to get drafted. I didn't want to be in the Army. I thought that would be, fate worse than death. So I went and volunteered, joined the Marine Corps, spent 5 years in the Marines, including one tour over in Vietnam. And while I was there, I got to looking at the people thinking, I can't talk to these people. And we had scouts and some people like that who could. And I was jealous of that. And so near the end of my term, I asked to go to language training so I could come back and be an advisor or something like that. And they sent me to the Defense Language Institute. And I was about halfway through this one-year course in Vietnamese, and I get this letter. It's a really strange letter. It's from the Office of Personnel. What the hell is the Office of Personnel? I mean, a lot of people have personnel offices, right? But it was in Washington, D.C. And inside it had this little letter, and it said, how would you like to serve your country in a new and different way? Blah, blah, just fill out this form. Well, I already realized that although I did quite well in the Marine Corps as a young officer in combat, that I wasn't a really good officer in peacetime because I didn't like doing things like shining my shoes and all those things that you have to do when you're in the military. So I grabbed at it and I filled out the form. What the hell, All they can do is turn me down. Mailed the form off, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, I get another letter. This time from a different return address, strangely enough. It said, please throw out the last letter that you got. And by the way, don't tell your friends you got it. Probably told everybody in the world I got it already, because no one told me it was a big secret. But it became pretty clear after I get the second letter, this is the CIA talking to me. So, once again, I filled out some more forms, and a while later, I get an airplane ticket, come back and visit us in Washington. And I went to Washington and said, hello, I'm coming to visit you. And they said, step into this room, please. And they wired me up. I mean, the wires going everywhere you can imagine. Sat me in a chair and started asking me questions. Do you smoke pot? Do you like little boys more than little girls? You can't imagine, lots of pretty personal questions. Have you ever committed a felony? Have you ever told a lie? By the way, the answer to that is yes. Because if you say no, you know you've told a lie at some time or not. And it will show up. And that they're doing that on purpose because they want to see what your reaction level is. There's a polygraph test. And then I went back to school. I was still a Marine. Finished school, wondering, how the hell did they get my name? Apparently they were watching people in language school because they needed people who could do the language. When the Marines told me it was time for me to go to my next duty station, I wrote them a little letter and said, you know, I'm a reserve officer and my reserve commitment is just about over. Can I finish the school? And they went into shock because they thought I was going to extend, make a career out of it. And I said, no, I don't think so. And they started inviting me to come back and talk to them. And I said, nah, I really don't need to talk to you. I got out of the Marine Corps, and the next thing, at the end of the year, I was in Washington working for the CIA. It was a little more complex, and I'm kind of brushing over all the garbage you had to go through, but and I spent 28 years with the CIA. Guess where they sent me right away? Right back to Vietnam. Whoops! 4 years of it. I spent 5 years in Vietnam altogether. And then when we had to leave, because we left in '75, you know, we had to kind of pack up and leave in a big hurry. I came back to the States, went back to college, got my degree, kept employed. They were real nice about that. I worked all day long. For those of you who think, oh, my life is difficult because I have to work and go to school at the same time, by the time I finished my college degree, I had 4 children and was working full-time all day long and going to school all night long. My eldest 2 children never saw me in daylight. They'd stay up until midnight. They're still a little bit weird about that, just so they could see Daddy when he came home. But anyway, off we went. Japan, Indonesia, Thailand, Israel, Africa, Somalia, Uganda, Ghana, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe. Got that all memorized? That's going to be on the next test. So that's what colors my point of view about that. And it makes it easier for me to ask some professor who's never been away from his school book, what you going to be when you grow up, sonny? I finally retired. This is my 2nd or 3rd retirement job. I retired in 1998. Were any of you alive already? Yeah. No? That's when I retired. Then I thought, I don't want to be doing government stuff anymore. Let's do something where I use, you know, my body and I can get outside and keep traveling because I like to travel. Got a CDL. What is it? Yeah. Commercial driver's license. Actually, I got it from South Plains, now I think about it. I was the only guy that paid for it. Everybody else, the government paid for them. I tried that for a couple of years and figured out, nah. I think I was up on the top of a 18-wheeler trailer unstrapping a load of bricks over on Avenue A, back when Acme Bricks was there, and the wind was blowing, and the sand was blowing in my face. And this little voice said in my ear, "You're stupid." So I got my phone out, called the owner and said, "Where do you want me to park this truck? I'm done." I didn't have a job, so I started subbing in some of the high schools around town, which can be dangerous. You know in your heart of hearts, you know, as soon as you saw a sub walk in the room, right? Let's get this guy. And a principal at one of the high schools, it was at Monterey. The principal was a really decent guy. And anybody here from Monterey? No Monterey students? There's a corner in Monterey. It's 2 corridors. And they call it Cowboy Corner. I never, knew why they called it that. And one day I was standing outside a classroom near that corridor, and a bunch of Hispanic kids are coming up corridor this way, mumble, 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 you know, more like a mob than a group of kids. And coming from the other side were a bunch of African American kids. What I saw was, it's rumble time. So I stepped out in the middle of the intersection, and when they got there, I said, "Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you came to my intersection." And when we got done talking, they all laughed and went away. And the principal of the school came out from behind the wall locker where he was hiding and said, "Not bad. You should be a teacher." I said, "But I don't have a graduate degree." And he said, "Come to my office and I'll give you a recommendation to tech." So I went back to school. And now you find me here. I'm still retired, but I'm doing something that I enjoy doing. And out of a class of, say, this semester I've got about 140 students. If a couple of light bulbs turn on somewhere out in the crowd, that makes me happy. But you will see me point out things that you won't find in your textbook as we go along. Of course, the second half of history, since I lived through the Cold War, you hear a lot more, but even in this stuff that we're talking about. Anybody got any questions so far? Everyone's been taking copious notes, right, so they can regurgitate all this. I think maybe this is being recorded. I can't prove it, but if it is being recorded, I'll send you the URL. It's actually a little library that she puts all the recorded classes in, which is sometimes useful if you miss a class or something like that. Okay. Now, I'm going to take about a 3-minute break while I run down the hall and grab a set of notes, because I don't want to do this off the cuff. Probably still sitting there wondering why the hell did the old man tell us all about globalism. I didn't really need to know that sort of thing. If you accept that we were doing business, or Europe was doing business with China back and forth, that sort of thing, and they were getting used to it, what did China have to offer? Well, they had silk. And if you think about it, can you imagine right now wearing woolen, unprocessed woolen underwear and woolen clothes right now? Right now, I mean, this time of year, walking the street. That's what they had in Europe. They didn't have any, thinner, durable material. They were getting around to using cotton and stuff like that, but they didn't have that. And silk was just wonderful. because it was strong, and it was very flexible, and it was light, breathable, that sort of thing. Then spices. You were used to getting all these spices. Oh. Okay, spices help your food taste better. What else do spices do for us? Even today. What are some of the other things that we would call a spice? What purpose might they serve? Medicine, you're right. For example, from the bark of the cinchona tree, you get a very important medicine called quinine. That came from South and Central America. What's quinine good for? Well, it used to be what they used to cure malaria. What's quinine good for nowadays here? It goes in tonic water, which makes a good gin and tonic, which is very important for Mr. Hunt. Out in the Indies, in the islands, the Pacific Islands, there's a little island called Ambon. On that island was the only source of a spice called cloves. What are cloves good for, besides flavoring meat and things like that when you cook? Anybody? Any ideas? You've all had clove oil in your mouth. Oh, I don't do that! Yeah, you do. Anybody ever had a filling? You know, before you take that really big Novocaine needle and sticks it in your gum, you take a little cotton Q-tip and they swab around the gum for a bit. Really strong, kind of fragrant smelling stuff. That's clove oil. If back in the old days, even before I was born, you can imagine, people with a toothache who didn't have any other way to make it feel better, use clove. Put the clove in the hole in their tooth or whatever, because it has a numbing effect. What else do we use spices for? Now, see, you have to put yourself back into the 15 or 1600s and figure out what they don't have. What did they not have that was really, really important if you're talking about food? Something that was last year during the COVID, during the economic crisis, we had trouble buying them because I bought one. And about to buy it. Refrigeration. So spices were very important for preserving food. Like along the American coast, up around Newfoundland, up in what is now Canada, there's great fishing grounds. People came all the way from Europe, from Portugal, from France, from England to fish there. A long time, by the way, before the discoverers discovered that area. They were already fishing there. What we know about fishermen, right? They don't tell anybody about where they caught those fish. How could you get the fish home all the way from Newfoundland back to England or to France? Catch the fish, land on some beach, take the fish off the boat, clean them, and salt them. Put them in barrels filled with salt or brine oil. So, the spices, in fact, if you take a steak and marinate it, and use like salt and other things like that, you find it doesn't spoil as fast as fresh steak spoils even now. Because I do that, I freeze them and do that sometimes. Anyway, furs, timber, you had to go overseas for timber sometimes. To get the right kind of wood or precious wood. Eventually things like steel. The steel process was really, really rudimentary then. Some people in India were making steel. All those things were attractive. Now, as time goes by, Europe's going to slowly but surely transform. Its population is going to grow. I want to say it was in the low 70 millions in the 1300s. And then they had a big bubonic plague, they had the Black Plague, and the population went back down again. Not a whole lot, give or take a few million, maybe 8 or 9 million people. Then it grew back up again, and by the 1500s, where we're kind of starting this story, Europe's population is over 90 million. Over in the Americas, the population, there's a lot of arguments about this, but I think that using testaments of the first Europeans to get here, plus archaeology and things like that, I think the general ballpark figure is about 50 million people living in the Americas. We'll talk about population and issues like that. But this trade thing that I was talking about, people are used to it and they want it. But in the 13 or 1400s, a new empire grew up called the Ottoman Empire. They're Islamic. They started fighting to control the Mediterranean Sea, which was part of that overland route to get to China. So suddenly, there's a big roadblock, making it at least more expensive, if not more dangerous or impossible, to get to China. So there's big commercial. Money makes the world go round. Right? When people say, why was America settled? And people say, oh, religion, opportunity, money. That's why America was settled. Money. I don't care if you're a Puritan and you didn't like the church. You had to have money to get there, right? You had to have a sponsor. The only reason you got to America was the sponsor put up the money for you to buy a boat. Same thing with Christopher Columbus. You had to get a sponsor. The money pushed that. That's awful cynical, isn't it, Mr. Hunt? Why is our country here? Because of money. Well, in part, of course, took other motivations to get people to be silly enough to get on a boat and go across the rough waters that they want to go. But anyway, so now you get a roadblock. You've got this Islamic roadblock, making it hard to get to China. On the Iberian Peninsula, which is kind of next door to the Italian Peninsula, and those big trading cities of Venice and Genoa, they were fighting an 800-year-long war to drive Islamic forces off of the peninsula. They'd been invaded about 800 years before. They didn't finish that project until 1492, a strange year for any of you who've read your little golden book of history. You know something happened in 1492. Well, one part of the Iberian Peninsula was kind of out of that. They'd finished their part of this war. The Spanish called the war the Reconquista, which if you want to literally translate it, it means the reconquering, which implies that it's something they already had that they lost and they're going to get it back. And the question in my mind is, did you really ever have it? But anyway, that's a story for another day. The people in the little kingdom of Portugal found themselves not having to fight the war the way that the other people on the Iberian Peninsula, the Castilianos, the Aragon, people from Aragon. You notice I didn't mention a country? What country didn't I mention when I'm talking about the Castilians and Aragonese? Whom I'm not speaking? Who did I mention? How about Ferdinand and Isabella? Who were they? Don't know who Ferdinand and Isabella were? The people that gave money to Christopher Columbus? Who were they? Come on, somebody give me the little golden book history answer to this question. It's not the right answer, but I want somebody to say it. What's the country I didn't mention? No, I don't know. What country's on the Iberian Peninsula with Portugal? Spain! Only guess what? Ferdinand and Isabella were not the king and queen of Spain. Why? Spain didn't exist. Ha! That was in your little golden book of history right there. He was the king of Aragon. She was the queen of Castile. 1469, they decided to get hitched. So in the family, they had pretty much what made up what is Spain now, between the two of them, but it wasn't one country. It's two separate governments. They were still busy, Ferdinand and Isabella were still busy driving the Moors off the Iberian Peninsula, but the Portuguese were done with their fighting. They still helped. They're all related by blood. The Europeans were, well, really big on only marrying relatives because those are the only people you could trust. So very, sooner or later in the families like the Habsburg family, the people start being cross-eyed. And I'm not joking. If you look at pictures of the kings of Spain, Philip II, Philip III, Philip IV, they had what they called the Habsburg lip. There wasn't a lip at all. They had a jaw extension. And the last of the Philips couldn't even chew meat. Why? Well, if you keep marrying your first cousin, or your nieces and nephews in some cases, you have these little problems with genetics. If you raise cattle, you know that you can only keep a bull for about 7 years and you trade out. But anyway, that's a different story. The Portuguese are interested in a few things. They do business on the Mediterranean, the part that they can travel over without running into the Ottoman Empire guys. All through the war, the Reconquista, if you want, they had a great source of slaves. And it wasn't a racial thing. Because before that, on the Iberian Peninsula, there were lots and lots of Slavic slaves and lots of Scandinavian slaves. Oh, white people? Slaves? You bet. You bet. Lots of them. But as time went by in the Reconquista, the slaves are what? Why was someone a slave? How could he become a slave? Because they were people that were defeated in the conflict, who happened to be, for the most part, North African. See where I'm going to here. The justification for slavery from the time of the Romans and the Greeks was a very simple justification. I whooped you. Now you got to do what I said, kind of like the playground, right? The justification is going to change a little bit as time goes by. We'll talk about that. So the Portuguese, they want that trade. They're running out of slaves because they're not fighting a war anymore. Where are they going to get them? They have an idea where they come from. And there's other things they want. They want to get, they want to around to China because they can't go through the Ottoman territory. And so what's going to happen is they're going to start the exploration, the age of exploration. They're going to develop the technology to do it. A fellow by the name of Prince Henry, the third son of King John of Portugal, is going to open a school. He's going to sponsor exploration. He's going to sponsor the development of ships that fit what they need to explore. He's going to sponsor research into navigation. He's going to die in, let's say, 1460, and by the end of that century, they're going to have reached all the way to the southern tip of Africa and started up the other side and reached India, the west coast of India. Eventually, and we'll talk about this in more detail, they're going to get all the way after India. They're going to move on all the way to the kind of the belly of Asia, of East Asia, Southeast Asia, we'll call it, and all the way up to China and to Japan. Now, 1492, Granada falls, and the Spanish no longer have a war to fight, and they got a lot of soldiers left over that they need to do something with. And they'd really like to go to China, but the Portuguese have got the route all sewed up on one side, and the Ottoman Empire has the route all sewed up on the other side. So how the hell are they going to get there? And we will conclude by mentioning a guy who's been going from king to king and ruler to ruler, trying to get someone to sponsor him. And nobody's listening. And all the scientists say he's a little bit wacko, and he was a little bit wacko. His name is Christopher Columbus. And finally the Spanish say, what the hell? We need a route. Let's give it a shot, even though their own scientists were saying this guy's full of it. Not because the world's round. Everybody thought the world was round by then, for over 100 years. But because he thought he didn't do well in math in school. He was self-educated. Theories were great, but his math was bad, and he miscalculated. He thought if he sailed straight west from the Iberian Peninsula, he could get to China. That way they didn't have to go through the Portuguese route or through the Ottoman Empire's route. And of course, he's going to bump into something. Until the day he dies, he's going to insist that it's the Indies, that it's the East Indies. He miscalculated the circumference of the world. I mean, in principle, he had the right idea. He just, you know, I guess he didn't take calculus 1 or something. He couldn't figure that out. So that's where we'll start up next time. We'll start talking about those guys. Familiarize yourself. I'll send out another copy of the announcement. I know, I sent you one. You got it as an email. It's also on Blackboard, the first announcement in there. It tells you the URLs to get into OpenStax textbook, and it tells you how to get straight into Blackboard. So go in and copy those down, use them one time and bookmark them, so that getting into all this stuff doesn't take you so long. Otherwise, you know, you go all the way through the SBC thing and then hit the drop down and sign in here, sign in again there. Anybody got any questions? I'm ready to take some notes. Oh, about notes. Your notes are your notes. However, when we do exams, you're allowed to bring your handwritten notes with you. Not printouts of my notes, your notes. Okay? So maybe it's of some benefit to take written notes.